friends, I mentioned in a recent video that we use something a little unusual to wash our dishes in this household. Something, in fact, that we grew ourselves. So today I'm going to take you back to the fall 2024 garden to show you how we processed this homegrown plant to make our own biodegradable, eco-friendly sponges. We got loofah. This is so exciting. I've never grown loofah before, so I wasn't even sure if I would get harvest. I knew it was a plant that requires a really long growing season, which we have a pretty great growing season. We have about a 6-month span from frost date to frost date, but I wasn't sure. And we got a harvest, so I'm super excited about that. With loofah, you are supposed to wait until they dry out to harvest. These are still green. Normally, ideally, I would wait until all the loofah had dried out on the vine, and I believe they turn like a tan color and fully dry out. That's the ideal way to harvest loofah. I did not have time to do that. I have these, I was able to harvest them, but they're gonna require a little bit of extra processing in order to be able to get to the inside of this, which is what we want to really harvest out of this plant. That's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take all of these inside, pop them in the oven, and see how much we get from this. I'm really excited.
So I brought my loofah inside, and I'm going to do a few things to prep these. First, I'm making a few cuts in these loofah. This was a little bit awkward because I was trying to film without my arm getting in the way, so bear with me. But I'm starting by cutting the ends off. Then I'm gonna make a long cut from end to end, lengthwise down the gourd. I am making these cuts to help moisture escape from the skin of the gourd. Like I said before, these loofah didn't have enough time on the vine to get to optimal stage for harvesting the inside structure, which is what we want to use for sponges. Because they didn't dry out all the way, the skin is very difficult to peel. In order to remove the skin cleanly, I'm going to be baking these in the oven to break down the skin a little bit and release some of the moisture from the inside of the loofah. Cutting off the ends and slicing down the middle gives a place for steam to escape while these are baking in the oven. Now that the loofah are prepped and on baking sheets, I'm popping them in the oven at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. I baked these for about an hour and 20 minutes. The loofah on the second tray were larger, so I left those in for an additional 20 minutes or so. Depending on the size of the loofah, timing may vary on this, so if you try this, just be sure to check on them every 20 minutes or so that nothing burns. I decided to take these out because I could see that the skin had gotten significantly thinner. The exposed flesh on either end had started to dry out and shrink a little bit, and I tested peeling some of the skin off with success. I let these hang out on the counter for a while until they were cool enough to handle, and then it's time for the messy part. Keeping the loofah on a baking tray, I loosened the cut edge of the skin and peeled away strips until all the skin was removed, revealing the fibrous interior of the gourd. Now we have the structure of the loofah that we're going to use, but it's still really messy and filled with cooked remnants and seeds. This structure is cylindrical and removing the seed is very difficult, so we are going to cut it open. I'm cutting lengthwise down the exterior using kitchen shears and then again cutting lengthwise several times in the interior of the cylinder until I have one flat sheet to work with. This makes it much easier to get in here and remove all of the seeds and pulp. Heads up, this task is 100% a sensory nightmare, so just be forewarned, if you have sensory issues with textures that are slimy, this task is not for you. Now that the loofah is flat, I'm able to pick out all the seed and pulp that are stuck in here and rinse it clean. I ended up doing an initial cleaning with water and then soaking these in some soapy hot water for a while to help remove any stubborn bits of pulp that were stuck in the rough texture of the loofah. I repeated this process for all of my loofah, and then I just have to lay them out to dry.
All right, it's been a while since I prepped these loofah. This is what they look like now that they're all clean and dry. They're stiff, they're pretty abrasive, but when you wet them, they get softer. So they lose some of their stiffness, they lose some of their abrasiveness when they are wet. We have been using these as our primary method of washing dishes for about 2 months now, and I really love them. This is the one that we've been using. I cut one of these in half, and that's the size that we have been using. I like this size because I can kind of fold it up to the size of a traditional sponge, and having a couple layers means that it absorbs a little bit more water when I'm washing things versus just doing one layer. It's just not going to absorb as much water and hold as much soapy water as a traditional sponge. So I like to fold it to use it like a sponge, but that's up to your preference.
This is how the loofah grows. What I did to get it flat was I snipped these inside sections so that it lays flat.
I left these sections on here. You could cut these out so it's totally flat. I left these on here on purpose because the outside is a little bit softer. It's flatter, it's not as abrasive. These inside bits where all the seeds were is the most abrasive part. And I like that because it kind of gives you the feel of a traditional sponge where one side is scrubbier than the other. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You could fold it so that the soft side is out if you're working with something that is a little bit more delicate. You can fold it so that the abrasive side is out if you're working with something where you really need to get in there and scrub aggressively. This one that we started with came from a slightly younger, smaller squash, and I've noticed that it's not as abrasive as this one, which was the biggest one we got. It was the most dried out on the vine. It still wasn't fully ripe, but it's definitely noticeably larger and more abrasive. So I think that this coming season, if we're able to start these plants earlier and get them to a place where the gourds are maturing on the vine, we will probably have even more scrubby sponges to work with next year. I will say these are not as scrubby and intense as a plastic scrub brush or something like that, but I still really love them. It works for almost all of our dish cleaning needs, and it's 100% biodegradable and it can go right back into our compost, which is incredible. Any step that we can take towards reducing our plastic use and utilizing closed loop items in our home, that's a win. That's worth celebrating. Full disclosure, we do need to occasionally use a plastic-based scrub brush or scrub daddy to deal with cooked on messes, but even so, we're still reducing so much plastic waste by using this most of the time. Just because something isn't a perfect solution doesn't mean we should stop taking steps towards progress. I think a lot of times with how things are portrayed online and in the area of sustainability, there's so much pressure to be perfect, but that's not how progress is realistically made. So let this be your encouragement that a small change is still way better than no change. And lots of small changes build up to equal big change. I hope this inspires you to make a small swap in your everyday life to step a little bit closer to a more positive impact or a more sustainable lifestyle. I hope you found this helpful, and let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions for swaps that we can incorporate into our home to be more sustainable. Until next time.